Every conclusion to a major arc in One Piece is followed by an avalanche of opinions about the current state of the series, ranging from "this arc ruined One Piece" to "this is peak fiction." As the curtains on Wano have closed, I want to dive into the arc in its entirety to see if it should be considered amongst the best or worst arcs in the series. Wano is where I joined weekly readers for the first time since I was growing up. At first, it was really exciting getting to read each new chapter, but something changes when you start reading chapters weekly. Every page and panel is dissected with more pressure. When you have to wait a week or two for just 20 pages, those 20 pages need to be satisfying in isolation, while also feeling like it moves the story forward. For me personally, I felt like I started overreacting to small details every single week. I either conflated how great a moment was, or I was too harsh on the smallest moments. That is why I was so excited to reread Wano in its entirety. Wano's first act is one of my favorite introductions to a new island. One of the best aspects of One Piece are the first chapters at a new location where you get to explore all of the inner workings of this new place. It is a main selling point for what makes the series work in general. All of our characters going to wildly different places and existing in new, well-fleshed out environments. I think some of the most iconic beginnings to an island have to be Skypiea, Water 7, and Dressrosa. Wano's introduction fits nicely with those heavy hitters, as its first act starts with a bang. Oda wastes no time planting the seeds for Wano's emotional story threads. There are so many different characters to balance, and right from Luffy's crash on Wano's shores, we get introduced to all of it. Luffy reunites with Zoro, and then we slowly branch out, seeing what Law, Kinemon, and the rest of the Straw Hats are up to. The start of the story fuels with the subtle world building as we see the juxtaposition of Wano's inner capital and the wastelands that most of its people are forced to live off of. Oda then wastes no time dropping the first reveal. Kinemon and Momo are from the past. I love how this fits thematically with the world that Oda has set up. Wano is based off of Japan's past, and having characters literally come from the past and hijack the narrative is fitting. In addition, it sets the stage for some of the major payoffs, mainly that an event that happened 20 years prior is directly connected to the stakes of today, even if it isn't directly related to the crew. While all of this is happening, we get hints into the corruption of Wano. From the outside, Wano seems like a paradise that is only benefited by being closed off from the world, but within pages we see Wano has deep-rooted issues and that the vast majority of the population starves, only getting scraps from the capital. Kaido is literally draining Wano of its resources, leading to the majority of people suffering, and because of Wano's closed doors, no one can come help. Wano is in need of saving. For 20 years, it has needed someone to overthrow Kaido, and now Luffy has arrived. The escalation of Wano is really something special. Luffy escalates the plan immediately after seeing the hardships of the people up close. The scale of One Piece continues to grow, especially post-time skip, and Wano continues that trend, giving us an arc that is only rivaled by Marineford in scope. Two conflicts set this arc into motion in its first act. Luffy's first showdown with Kaido, and then the plan to steal the blueprints to Kaido's mansion. Immediately, Oda sets the stage for the massive gap in strength between Luffy and Kaido, with one of the coolest moments in the arc. One stroke, Kaido crushes Luffy. The stakes here are obvious. Luffy has a long way to go if he even hopes to put a scratch on Kaido. But if there is one thing that we know for certain, Luffy will always get back up. For the entire series, we have seen just how high Luffy's potential is, but now he will have to reach that potential or his journey will come to an end. The second major conflict is for all the other Straw Hats to focus on, getting the plans to Kaido's mansion. After most of the Straw Hats not being with us during Whole Cake Island, it is so much fun seeing them execute this mission. The first act of Wano is simply a joy to read because of how much we focus on the Straw Hats and just get to spend time with the characters. Wano is hilarious, and something as simple as the Straw Hats' reaction to Luffy getting captured is another reason why this arc is so enjoyable. It is great seeing the Straw Hats be on the same island and all of the chaos that comes from that. The one thing that Oda runs the risk of in the start of Wano is continuing to introduce too many characters. It can feel that the story gets bogged down when so much of the focus is given to characters that we don't know, cutting page time for characters that we already love. Too many characters is something that is rightfully talked about a lot with One Piece, not just Wano, but I actually don't think it's an issue with the series because fundamentally, One Piece would not work without it. The appeal of going on this journey with the Straw Hats is getting to know the many characters along the way. The structure of One Piece means every single story arc will introduce us to dozens of new characters, and inevitably there will be some that we don't enjoy as much. This inevitability is a fair talking point, but not a strong piece of criticism for an argument against the quality of One Piece's story. For Wano, the introduction of new characters ends up being one of its greatest strengths, in particular, the Scabbards. Kinemon and Momo have been in the story for a long time, but all of the other Scabbards were able to leave their mark, in particular Denjiro. The reveal that Denjiro has changed his appearance to protect the princess over the last 20 years was one of the best in the arc. Denjiro's story embodies the will of Wano's people, making him stand out from many of the newly introduced characters. He and the rest of the Scabbards help to contextualize Kinemon's role in the story, that he is willing to do so much for the people of Wano. It is the kind of passion seen from Denjiro that makes meeting all of these new characters worth it at every new island we go to. To see people care so much about a place or a goal that they are willing to sacrifice their own quality of life. That is why the Scabbards are fantastic. Even though they don't have the power to beat Kaido, they will die trying if they have to. Denjiro and the Scabbards pull focus to the struggle and passion of the people at Wano, setting the foundation for the payoffs in the arc, the backbone of Wano forming in its second act. Here, Oda masterfully uses the length of Wano's land to spread out our characters to different cities as they prep for the raid. This leads us to Yasui's sacrifice. In line with the misdirection of Wano, Yasui is first seen as just a weird guy from Wano who is way too noisy. He follows Zoro around and makes some quips, and that's about it. He continues to insert himself into the narrative until he eventually is sentenced to death, and we find out that he is the former head of the military for Wano. He was a supporter of Odin and one of the reasons the Scabbards became worthy of following him. This is the first of many payoffs that Wano gives us. Alongside Luffy facing off against Kaido, Yasui's death is the iconic moment to kick off the arc. In Wano, Yasui goes from a goofy man to a symbol of hope that Wano can break free from Kaido's grip. This moment is infused with all of Oda's best qualities, a gag character turned into an emotional anchor as everyone we love realizes the gravity of the situation, a person who is willing to give up his life in order to protect his dream. This moment is tied together with the reveal that the Smile Fruit has taken away everyone's ability to have any other emotions. The people of Wano smile because they are forced to. Wano's first act does a fantastic job at giving us great world building and momentum while slingshotting us into the mystery and conflict. I am surprised at how quickly these first two acts flow together and really get the ball rolling. Then this takes us to the third act, which is well over double the length of the first two acts combined. To kick off Act 3, we get one of the greatest backstories in all of anime, the story of Odin. Odin is the linchpin to Wano, and he passed away 20 years before the arc even began. He meant everything to the Scabbards, and delving into who he was as a person is how Oda provides justification for the scabbard's internal logic. Oden always wanted to sail the seas, but because Wano is closed off from the rest of the world, he never did. He spent his days as a troublemaker with immense talent. As time moved on, he helped each of the scabbards turn into upstanding citizens, and eventually established himself as a well-liked and respected person who would eventually be shogun one day. Then pirates came to Wano's shores, and Oden took his chance sneaking onto Whitebeard's ship and making it out to sea. Oden's strength is shown to be just short of Whitebeard and Roger, and his thirst for adventure gave him a chance to set sail with both of those icons. In the middle of this backstory, Oda takes the time to give us a window into the lives of the biggest players in One Piece. Oden made the end of the journey with Roger, and we find out that when Roger found One Piece, all he could do was laugh. A genuine, unfiltered laugh at the end of the journey is the best possible conclusion anyone could hope for. This juxtaposes the forced laughter that Kaido imposes on the people of Wano with the smile fruits. Oda suggesting that Kaido could never be king of the pirates. Laughter here symbolizes the idea that freedom can be achieved through your ability to have emotions and feelings. After Oden's quest to the sea, he comes back to Wano and learns that Kaido has taken over. Oden makes a fool of himself every day under the promise that Kaido will leave Wano. Of course, Kaido goes back on his word, and it ends in the most tragic way possible. Oden challenges Kaido to a battle and ends up losing after some foul play. Oden is sentenced to death alongside his scabbards. They are all meant to boil. Oden, in a deal with Kaido to protect his friends, holds the scabbards above him as he boils alive in front of all the people. In the end, Oden saves the scabbards, allowing them to make it to the future and recruit the Straw Hats to fight against Kaido. Oden, the man who was meant to boil, gave his life so the chance to beat Kaido remained. Oda is a master of flashbacks, and Oden is just another example of this. This backstory provides context to the themes of the arc, expands our understanding of characters we have known since Chapter 1, and tells us the heartbreaking story of Oden himself. All of this sets the stage for the climax of Wano as we return to the current timeline. And now to the raid. The start of the raid has a frantic energy and hype to it that is really only matched by what Oda was able to accomplish at Marineford. There are so many heavy hitters making their move that the story starts to become unpredictable. All of the connections between Kaido, Orochi, and Big Mom are teetering. And on top of this, you have the alliance between Luffy, Law, and Kid. With so many characters, the raid runs the risk of confusing the reader, but Oda does a good job at balancing the many different locations and battles. He does this through the transporter snails, allowing the characters to communicate to one another, and through what I like to call ripple effect action. Ripple effect action is a technique often used in cinema where decisions made by characters domino to other areas of big set pieces. This technique offers up clarity of action during times where it might otherwise be confusing, and makes the stakes very clear. When big set pieces ignore this technique, it will almost always lead to uninteresting sequences where the viewer is bored instead of enthralled. Oda is a master of this technique in manga. Every single decision a character makes has a tangible effect on the battle, resulting in plans having to constantly shift and change without making things confusing. Wano is the only arc that you can put on the same scale as Marineford in terms of big players in the world being involved. This fight isn't locked down to one group, but includes two Emperors of the Sea, most of their crews, the people of Wano, and many other factions. One of the most impressive aspects of Wano in comparison to Marineford is perspective. Marineford is shown entirely through Luffy's lens. He is the driving force behind everything in that battle. For Wano, while Luffy is still the main lens we see, there are so many other perspectives Oda has to balance, putting even more pressure on Oda's ability to use ripple action effectively. One of the characters that actually has some of the best moments is Zoro. I know the hype for Zoro killing Kaido got a bit out of hand, but I don't really think most took that theory seriously, and I don't want it to outshine the amazing character work Zoro got in this arc and at the raid. I love the addition of Zoro and Killer in the final fight. Like, we all know Law, Luffy, and Kid are there, but seeing Zoro and Killer get some recognition was nice to see as well, because they are also members of the Monster Generation, and the moment Zoro gets against Kaido was simply spectacular. Zoro gave damage to the strongest man in the world and is recognized for his strength. In Wano, Zoro continues to show his evolution as a swordsman who is worthy of having the title of greatest in the world, while also fitting seamlessly into the larger narrative. He also gets some great comedic hits and then is able to get back up again and defeat King, showing that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are as strong as any trio of pirates you will find in the entire world. There is another major character that is introduced that we need to discuss before moving on with the rest of the raid, and that is Yamato, Kaido's child. Yamato is a late inclusion in the arc, and yet their presence immediately warps the story. Yamato brings some of the best energy to the series, and I love how everyone reacts to them when they say they're Odin. But it is more than just a gimmick to their character, but is an essential part of showing how Yamato completely opposes their father. I love One Piece relationships with parental figures and how Luffy doesn't care at all about his biological father, and Yamato deserts theirs in the same way Sanji does. Yamato is another character in line with the idea that parents must be willing to let their children grow into what they want to be and not what they think is best for them. They also show Oda's focus as a writer, introducing a character that fits in with the humor of the series, but also becomes a reinforcement of the ideas that he is exploring. This late into One Piece's run, you would think that he would lose focus on the thematic ideas, but it's the opposite. Wano may be one of Oda's greatest accomplishments in thematic clarity. All of this builds to Kaido and the climax fight between him and Luffy. Everything hinges on this moment for Wano to become the peak of One Piece, and this is where Wano falls a little flat. Kaido is the monstrosity that this entire arc has been building up for years. Kaido has put the people of Wano through hell and back, going as far to take away their emotions. Ever since he fell from the sky, we knew he was on a collision course with Luffy. Now, amongst one of the biggest battles in One Piece, Kaido stands at the top of the pyramid, and his character feels empty. Character development and exploration is what makes One Piece work, and that is what's missing from Kaido. He has been waiting for the day where he can be defeated by Joy Boy and finally put an end to his life, but Oda doesn't take it much past that. The results are Kaido feeling more like an obstacle than an emperor of the sea who is an actual threat to take the One Piece. Kaido fails to fill the shoes of the heavy hitters at the end of the biggest arcs in One Piece. Doflamingo, Rob Lucci, and Katakuri stand above the mediocrity of Kaido as a character. All of the build-up to Wano meant that it would have the chance to rival any arc in One Piece, and the one major category that feels like it doesn't is in Kaido's characterization, and his showdown with Luffy results in a bit of a mixed bag. On the positive side, Kaido's raw strength and build-up in the story means that even if he as a character isn't as fleshed out as he could have been, the fight is still able to provide some impactful moments. Since this showdown is the top of the battle, everything that happens here affects the fights below. When Zoro or Big Mom fall from the top, they affect the rest of the battles, and that is true when the entire palace starts to go down. On top of this, our heroes get to use their powers in some pretty cool ways, which is a lot of fun. The back and forth between Luffy and Kaido has some of Oda's best artwork, and that is really a common theme with this arc as a whole. Why this fight is able to work at all is the reveal of Gear 5. Every new gear is always hype, but Gear 5 might be the most tied thematically. Laughter is a massive part of this arc. It's a sign of freedom. If there is one thing that should never be taken away from us, it is the ability to have emotions. Oppressive governments can take away a lot from us, but the one thing we will always have is the ability to laugh. When Luffy reaches his 5th gear, he becomes a sign of freedom. I can't imagine a more perfect ability to match the idea presented in Wano. Once Luffy reaches Gear 5, the conclusion to this monumental battle wraps up relatively quickly, and Kaido's defeat is robbed of the real weight that it should have had. Going into this reread, I was most excited to re-experience Kaido's character under a new lens, and hopefully things would finally click for him, and I would be able to put the monumental stamp on Wano as one of the greatest things I've ever read. But that didn't happen. Instead, I feel like I missed something, but as I read and reread, reality set in. The full potential of Kaido was wasted at the end of Wano. Even with the disappointment of Kaido, the final battle and the arc as a whole still has a lot going for it. Oden's backstory is one of the greatest accomplishments in the series and should be considered as one of the best backstories in all of anime. Wano is also Oda at his most thematically poignant, arguing for the importance of individual emotions and how true freedom is the ability to feel things for yourself. Wano has a slew of fantastic side characters, and the island itself is as fleshed out as any of the other islands in the series. Oda pushed himself with the structure of the raid and the flow of the battle. On all accounts, Wano is a fantastic arc, and should be heralded as one of the better arcs in the series, even if Kaido's characterization held it back from being the runaway best arc in Shonen.